What's going on, guys, and welcome to Yoda Expedition. Today we're going to be looking at the Puddle pod lights from Meso Customs. We're going to be doing this install on our 3rd gen Tacoma. So this install is a little bit in depth. We're going to have to be running a bunch of wiring throughout the cabin. We're going to have to take off the door panels, and we're going to have to take off one of the A-pillar covers as well. These are also available for the 4Runner. The installation on those is going to be a lot simpler. There is no wiring harness involved in that installation. You just have your Puddle pod lights, and they plug directly into the wiring that is already inside your mirrors. If you're installing these on a 4Runner, I just want to note that these will not work if you have a factory 360 camera installed. Also, for this installation, we don't have it, but there is an optional switch. So if you want to operate the Puddle pod lights from a switch, you can do so. But without the switch, they are going to be turning on when you unlock or lock the vehicle, or when you open the door and your dome light comes on, these are going to come on as well. Taking a closer look here at the Puddle pod lights, you can see there is a full piece that's molded to replace the piece on your mirror from factory. It's got an integrated LED wiring on the back that plugs into the harness that we're going to be installing. As far as the wiring goes for the Tacoma, like I mentioned, we have to pull off the door panels, and we also have to pull off the A-pillar cover. What we're going to be doing is plugging this into the harness inside the A-pillar, and then from there it's going to run down, and it's going to go to either side of the truck into each door panel. So it's not really hard, it's just going to take a little bit of time. We have to take off some of the interior panels, so hopefully we don't break any clips. If we do, Meso Customs shows all of the OEM replacement parts that you may need to do this installation. So let's go ahead and jump in the Tacoma. We'll start ripping that apart and get these installed. So the first thing I'm going to do is just disconnect the battery, because we are going to be unplugging the airbag that is in the A-pillar. So we don't want to be having power there while we're messing with that. So first step, disconnect your battery. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to take everything off on the driver's side, and then you can go ahead and repeat all those steps on the passenger side. So the first thing I'm going to do is take off the door sill here. I'm just going to use like a trim prying tool. There's clips on there. I'm going to pop that off, and then we also have to take off the kick panel here down by your left foot. There's a little nut, plastic nut that you can just take off with your fingers, and there's some clips. We'll go ahead and get those two things off. Next thing I'm going to take off is the door panel. So we're going to have a screw down inside here. There's a little carpeted pad you're going to have to pull out with a pick tool, and then we'll take that screw out. There's also a screw behind the plastic that is inside of your door handle section. So I'm going to use a plastic prying tool. I'm going to pop that out so I can get to that screw. Also, on the front side of the door panel, there's a little push clip here in the top right corner. So I'll go ahead and pop that in, and we'll get that pulled out. Next up, we have this cover here for the mirror. So we're going to go ahead and just pop this off, just like that. Now we can go ahead and start popping the door panel off. So I have the trim prying tool. I'm going to go around the bottom here. I'm going to put this in between and start popping the clips apart. Once you get your fingers in there, it's easy to just go around and pop everything off. All right. You can see it's all loose now. We just have to pull it up off of the top of the door. And then from the inside, we now have to disconnect the cables for the door handle and the electrical connection for your window switches. So for the cables, we're just going to go ahead and pop them out of their little holder, like so. And those pretty much come out very easily, just like that. That first plug's pretty easy to get out. The other one, the main one that's inside here, is pretty difficult to do on the door panel. So we're going to go ahead and pop the window switch assembly out of the door. You can just put your trim prying tool inside, just like that. Pop that up. And then from the inside, it'll be a lot easier to get that plug out. There's the plug. There is the tab that you have to press in. When this is installed, the tab is, in between here, and it's very difficult to get a nice grip on it. So now with that out, we can go ahead If you want, push on this where it's locking in. There we go. There we go. Now with that plug out, we can go ahead and fully remove the door panel. With the door panel removed, go ahead and look and see if you have any plastic clips remaining in your door. If you do, we're going to go ahead and pull those out and then reinstall those into the door panel. So when we go to reinstall the door panel, it's going to install correctly. Next up is the mirror. So we can go ahead and unplug that. That's pretty easy to unplug. When you took off this plastic piece here, these little plastic clips that are inside the door, you can pull those out and you can slip those back onto where they go. This will just make it a little bit easier to reinstall. So pull those out, clip it back on there. So in order to get the mirror off of the door, you can see there's like 3 things here covering up holes. Behind that we have 3 nuts. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the pick. We can pry those off. I'm going to go ahead, take a 10mm socket and ratchet, and we're going to take the 3 nuts off. Make sure while you're doing this, you're holding the mirror so that it doesn't just fall off once you take the last nut off. So the driver's side's pretty much disassembled. You can go ahead and do the same thing on the passenger side. Remove your door panel, remove your mirror. The only thing we have to do over here yet is remove the cover on the A-pillar. So let's go ahead and do that. So to get that off, where it says SRS airbag, there's a little cover there. I'm gonna take the pick tool and I'm going to pop that out. Just be gentle so you don't mar up the edge. Comes out pretty simple. And then there is a 10mm, so we're going to go ahead and take that out. Now with the 10mm bolt out, we're going to go ahead and take our trim prying tool and we're going to go ahead and just pop that off. It comes off pretty easily. And then once you have it pulled out, pull it straight up towards you to get it out from the dash area. And now we have all the wiring and your airbag exposed, so just be careful of that. So I'm gonna go over to the passenger side now. I'm gonna get that door panel off and the mirror, and then we can head over to the bench and we can get the new Puddle pod lights installed onto the mirrors, and we can start doing our wiring and reassembly. Finish up the passenger side and we're at the bench now. I have both mirrors here. So the first thing we're gonna do is just take some of this tape off on the wiring harness. So let's go ahead and do that. You're going to also pull this off on both sides. Just like so. Next up, we are going to be popping this section out here, and that is what we're going to be replacing with the Puddle pod from Meso Customs. So I'm going to take a pick tool, probably use my trim prying tool as well, and we're going to go ahead and pop this out. It looks like one of the tabs broke off, but that's okay because we don't need it. I was trying to be as gentle as possible, but one of the tabs still broke. So yeah, that's why they give you that OEM parts sheet in case you need to replace anything. Let's see if we have some better luck on this one. Again, if it does break, we're replacing this whole piece with the Meso one, so it's not that big of a deal. But obviously, if you don't have to break something, you don't want to. So instead of doing it on the back side, try here on the front, closest to the mirror. It pops up pretty easily there. Put our tool in there. Let's try to be gentle with it. There we go. So with both of those popped off, we're gonna now take the wiring harness here. For Meso, it has this little sticker on here that says, warning, be careful not to pinch wire when installing to mirror. So we have two, one for each side. We're gonna go ahead and fish these through. The passenger one, we're gonna have to do a little bit of trimming so that we have some clearance for the wiring. We'll show you how to do that. We're gonna start on the driver's side. It doesn't matter which one of these you use, they're exactly the same. So we're gonna take the these plug ends here. It's gonna be going in this orientation through this piece and then into the mirror. So we're gonna start with these, feeding these through here. You're gonna have to do one at a time. It's probably gonna be pretty tight. Once we get that through, then we'll work it through the mirror and reattach everything. Got one through, and there's the second one. Then just follow the factory wiring and put them right through there. Just like that. With the wiring through the mirror, we can go ahead and take the Puddle Pod light now and plug that in. You're gonna find there's obviously two plugs there that you put through. Only one of them is going to work with this. The second plug is for if you have Meso Custom turn signals. You can plug that right into here and then those will work properly. So I'm gonna take the wiring here, I'm gonna push it down so that it's like right in line with the OEM wiring. Same with this extra plug, we're not installing turn signals at this time. So I'm gonna push that all down in place. And now we can go ahead and pop this in place. If you feel any resistance, you might be pinching the wire, which you don't wanna do. So that is now fully installed. We'll go ahead now and slide this back down. Get this back lined up. Pop this back on. Pull any of your slack out. And then we're gonna take some electrical tape. We're gonna wrap some tape around this where we took the tape off. And then this side will be ready for reinstallation. Same thing on the passenger side. Feed those two plugs through. Now, according to Meso Customs instructions, this piece of plastic right here, we have to make a little cut, a little notch in there for clearance. So I just have a small pair of wire cutters here. So I'm gonna go ahead and snip this. Passenger side is plugged in. So we'll go ahead now, get this clipped in place, and I'm gonna take the plug that we just put together. I'm gonna have that sitting in there. We'll see if that works. See if we have any binding. Like I said, we'll go ahead and tape this up now. Puddle pods are both installed on the mirrors. We have the wiring going through and that's all taped up. So let's go ahead, mount these back onto the truck, and then we can install the wiring harness to make this work. Got the passenger side already installed. I'm gonna go ahead and do the driver's side. Just feed your wiring through. We'll get those studs lined up. Make sure they're pushed all the way through. Hold it in place until you get one of the nuts started. And we can just go ahead and tighten those down. I tried to save these so we can put them back on. Just put the sticky side up when you put them on the floor so you're not gonna ruin them. So with both mirrors now installed comes the fun part of wiring. I'm just gonna quickly go over the wiring that we have left. This plug here is going to be your jumper harness, and this is going to go inside the A-pillar, and then coming off of that you have the harness for the puddle pod lights. You're going to be plugging this in, little splitter here, so it's going to be going from 1 to 2 plugs. Obviously you have one for your passenger side and one for your driver's side there, which takes me to these. You're going to be plugging these into those 2 plugs, one for your driver's side and one for your passenger side. You can see one is shorter or has less wire than the other one. The shorter one's going to be for your driver's side. So now we can go ahead and start working on the wiring here for the driver's side. There's a couple of plugs down here inside the kick panel. We're going to be removing those. And then the boot that is inside the door jamb, we're going to be popping that out. And then the driver's side wire, we're going to be feeding that through there into the door panel. And then we have to do the same thing on the driver's side, connect everything back together and meet up here at the A-pillar. So to start things off, like I said, we have some plugs here to remove at the driver's side kick panel. There is 3 plugs. So we'll go ahead and pull all of those out. There we go. You can see those 3 plugs here. These all go through the door panel or through the boot here into the door panel. So now we need to pop this boot out that goes inside the cab, and then we need to feed the wires through that. So we got this pulled out. A little difficult to get this because it's obviously very tight in there. But once you get this pulled out, we have to pull this tape off so that we can gain access to inside the boot so we can feed our wire through. All right, so we're going to be taking the female side of the plug. That's going to be going from the inside of the truck to the outside, and then we have to feed that through this up to this here. So we're going to take some electrical tape, we're going to put it on the end of the plug, so while we're trying to feed it through everything, we're not getting hung up on the clip here or potentially rip any of the wires out of the plug. Let's feed this through to the hole here. All right, got that fed through. I thought that would have been easy, but it took me a little bit to get it through there as well. But now the fun part begins of trying to get this through this. So let's start doing that.
What are you doing, Corey?
12 seconds later.
All right, we're gonna try to make this a little bit easier. Usually when I'm pulling wire through boots and stuff like that, I'll take a piece of metal like this. You can get it at the hardware store or whatever. It comes in rolls. We're gonna back feed this through the rubber, and then once we get that through, we'll tape our wire onto there, pull this back through with the wire attached, and hopefully it'll make it a lot easier. There it is. Now I'm going to take, actually first of all I cut off that little hook that I had on there, because if I try to pull that back through, it's going to be grabbing on stuff and make it very difficult. Cut that off. Now I'm going to wrap this around the harness, because if I just leave it straight and I'm trying to pull it through, it's probably just going to pull that metal right through the tape and then not do me anything. So I'm going to wrap this around, then tape it, and then hopefully we can pull that through. So we have all that taped up, and now it sounds dumb, but it definitely helps a lot. I'm going to take some Dawn dish soap and I'm going to put a little bit on there just to make it slide through that rubber a little bit easier. Just rub it on there. Now we can start feeding this back through. Try to keep the boot straight as possible and pull straight. There we go. And we can go ahead and pull this tape off, take off the metal wire, and then we can get the boot back in place, both on the door and on the door jamb, and plug our wires back in that we took out. Now feed it into the door. and start pulling some of your slack through. We're going to obviously route it up and through and plug it in up here, and then we'll tape that so that it's secured up there. Pop that boot back in place. I'm gonna pull this back just a little bit so I can see the factory wiring harness. You obviously want to make sure when you're feeding this up inside the door panel or inside the door, you don't want to get it in the way of the window track because it's going to get caught and rip it or something like that. There's a wiring harness on the inside here. You're going to want to follow that up. Make sure it's secured to that somehow so it doesn't move. Have it feed up through this like so. Put a zip tie on that wiring harness to hold it tight against the inside of the door. And we can plug this in here like so. We'll secure that down as well. I'm gonna throw a zip tie on there. Now we can go pull the wires back inside. Actually, first thing I want to do is put some tape around this that we took the tape off of. Make sure you have that pushed all the way in so it's sealed properly. So we have our wire, which we're going to be running up to the A-pillar, and then we have our factory wires here. We can go ahead and plug those back in. I'm going to put the speaker back in, which, by the way, is the most disappointing speaker I've ever seen. It completely feels like nothing. So if you're thinking about doing a speaker upgrade, not a bad idea. So now I'm going to run the wire up to the A-pillar so we can plug that in when we get to that. I'm going to put this underneath the dashboard and get it around this first bolt hole here and have it come back out. Might be a little tricky because you have a bunch of wires and stuff down there. But feed it around that where this bolts. That'll help. Now that we have this fed through, you can just tuck the wire back in here all the way up. And then you have plenty of slack up here, and then you could put your weather stripping back in place. It'll hold it in there. Once we do the passenger side, we'll run that down here as well and up this to make our connection. Passenger side's done. We have the wiring ran through the boot here for the door up to our mirror. This side was a little bit easier. You only have 2 plugs on this side versus 3 plugs on the driver's side. And since there was only 2 plugs, I was able to pull the whole thing out and be able to work with it right here instead of having the plug still on the inside of the door and trying to fish everything through. But now we're going to take this wire, we're going to route it up underneath here, making sure it's not dangling down or in our way, and then we're going to feed it underneath the center of the dashboard, and then we'll have it come out on the foot panel of the driver's side, and then we'll end up feeding it up that same A-pillar to the main harness. So as you saw, we fed the wire through here. I got a hold of it from inside, pulled all of the slack through. I put a couple zip ties on the passenger side up underneath the dash to just hold it in place. Now I'm gonna go ahead and run this up underneath this dash piece, putting it behind this bolt like we did, running it up the side along with the other one coming out here, and then we could hook up the harness up here. Now, up in the A-pillar here, we have this gray plug. We're gonna go ahead and unplug that. This is where we're gonna be plugging in this harness here. As you can see with this plugged in, you're not gonna be really able to plug it back in to the OEM harness. It'd be way too long now. So we're gonna disconnect the plug from this plastic piece, and we're gonna lower that down farther into the dash. So I have a little pick tool, kind of hard to see, but we're gonna go ahead and take the clip out that's holding it into the A-pillar metal, just like that. Took that clip out. Now I'm gonna take the plug off of this plastic clip. So with this off, I have a straight pick tool. You can see there's a hole there in between the gray plastic and the white. So once I put this in there, we can push the plug off just like that. Clip that back in, plug this back in. Now this, we can plug in and put the extra down into the dash hole here. Now we're going to take this splitter harness here, plug that into here, and then we're going to plug both of these in, like so. It doesn't matter which one you plug it into. Now we can tuck the rest of this down in there as well. Like so. Now we can go put our A-pillar cover back on. Actually, before we do that, I'm gonna just test everything and make sure it works. Battery's hooked up, none of the airbags went off, so we're good there. So now when I open the door, the puddle light should come on. There you go. So they work. Also, when we unlock it, they will turn on as well. So at this point, we tested everything. It all works the way it should. We are ready to go ahead and put everything back together. When you are putting the A-pillar cover on, you just want to make sure that nothing is in the way of the airbag to make that not work properly. So you should be fine if you put the wiring just as how I did, tucking the extra down inside that dash hole. It's really not in the way of the airbag at all. So I'm going to go ahead and reinstall that. Got that clipped in place, put that 10 mil bolt back in there, pop that cover on. That's done. Now we can go ahead, put the door panels back on, put the kick panels back on, and the door sills, and we're finished. Guys, that's going to wrap up this install of the Meso Customs Puddle pod lights for the 3rd Gen Tacoma. Install was not too bad. It is a little time consuming running all the wires through everything, but it's really not that hard of a job. And I am actually really impressed with the output of these lights. It makes a big difference when it comes to having some extra light at night, whether you're in the parking lot and you just want to feel safer because you can see more around your vehicle, or you're doing something maybe at camp and you want to turn your dome lights on and have a bunch of extra light on the ground. It does a lot of light output, so that's definitely a plus. If you guys have any questions about this install, make sure to ask us down below in the comments. And if you want to grab these or anything else, you can head over to yodaexpedition.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.